we'll see how this goes. But anyway, all right. So Carol, I understand that you've done so much work in terms of taking classical monster stories or classical stories, and then somehow either writing them or editing people who turn them into punk stories or cyberpunk stories. Looking at you too, I'm truly fascinated. So, what is it like to write this kind of material, and what is this kind of material? What is the punk? How would you even phrase it?
Well, that is an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked. I will tell the little story of how I got into this. I read science fiction my entire life since I was a kid, and punk is one aspect of science fiction. I was in a Facebook group called Writerpunk, and it was all about people who liked writing different flavors of punk stories: cyberpunk, steampunk, biopunk. There's many different subgenres of it. One person said, "Hey, wouldn't it be really cool if we did like a steampunk tale of Hamlet?" And somebody went, "Oh, that's cool. I want to write a biopunk version of The Tempest." And I'm like, "Dibs on Macbeth," right? So we all thought we would make our little small press and make anthologies. And nothing happened until my founding partner, Jeffrey Cook, put a stake in the sand and said, "Deadline, guys, write these stories based on Shakespeare, whatever punk you want." So we did. We got these things rolling, and we had my friend TJ was the editor at the beginning, and we put a couple anthologies out, and it was all volunteer. We edited each other's work, and we had somebody make the cover, and we had different flavors of punk. And then I sort of segued into the editorial role because I clipboard and spreadsheet well. Let's be real. And so that's how I learned how to edit, and I learned so much about both punk genre and about editing and stories, because I was working with some great editors who volunteered their time. I read the original story, I read their edit notes, I dealt with the author who made some changes and went back and forth, and I got to see the whole process through a bunch of different editors, and I learned so much from doing this. I also learned a lot by writing punk stories that I love based upon classic stories that I love. We've had 6 anthologies so far. 2 based on Shakespeare, 1 based on Edgar Allan Poe, 1 based on classic stories you read in high school English class. And the latest one that's just come out is Taught by Time, Mythgoespunk. And so that's got mythology and folklore and legends and all. But the key point about punk is all the subgenres. There are so many flavors. It's getting a little bit, carried away with defining different genres of punk. But the basic idea of a punk story is that it's some sort of a science fiction alternate history story, for example, where things are not quite the way you would expect. In a cyberpunk story, we've got the typical government has been overthrown, for example, or corporations have taken control. The common man has no power, no authority, and is downtrodden. And in a cyberpunk story, they may try to take control and do something to improve their lot in life, but you know what? It doesn't usually turn out real well. Think of Blade Runner, and that's not a happy ending. So I like punk because it's a fascinating way to look at things. And I think it's really fun to take a classic story that we all know and love and twist it with a little bit of a punk edge.
Could you give us just a little taste of an example?
In this last anthology, and I'll talk about mine as opposed to somebody else's, because I looked at it from the creation viewpoint as well. But since we all edit each other's stories as well, we've got a bunch of cooperative editors. I feel comfortable putting my own story in the anthology, because they would have told me, "Carol, this sucks, don't put the story in," if that were the case. But I took a story based upon the myth of Echo and Narcissus. Echo was the little nymph who, was condemned to repeat others' words over and over again. And so I set it up as a kind of a biopunk thing where she was a clone who was working in a lab cloning other people. And the owner of the lab came in and was fooling around and had some more clones made for nefarious purposes, let's just say. So it was fun to take this classic myth that I knew from my kid who was a classic scholar and look at it set way in the future. So it's a sad, sad story. You know, many of my punk stories, cyberpunk in particular, and some of the biopunk ones, there's usually a lesson to be learned from these stories. And that was actually my segue into horror, because I was writing dark enough science fiction that horror was just maybe one step more.
So where can we get these?
They're all available on Amazon. If you look up Writerpunk Press, it's easy to find us that way. You can find them under my last name, Gyzander, Gyzander, because I'm either the editor or a contributor in each of the anthologies, so you can find them that way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carol. That was brilliant.